Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Brick City Brown Check podcast. Happy 2025, all. I know I have been out of commission for a few weeks. I've been very sick, which unfortunately you can still hear in my voice. So this week and next week, I'll just be recording shorts while I try to get my voice back on track. My doctor said it may be a couple of months before my voice is fully back. Let's hope it's not that long because nobody, including me, is going to want to hear me talk like this for a couple of months. But I wanted to jump on today to talk about the peanut farmer president from Plains, Georgia. Of course, I am talking about our 39th president, James Earl Carter Jr., otherwise known as Jimmy Carter. He is being laid to rest this week after living an amazing life of 100 years. Jimmy Carter is the first president I consciously remember in my lifetime. I was born in 1970, and Jimmy Carter was elected in 1976. So I remember very clearly as a little girl watching the inauguration of Jimmy Carter and listening to my parents talk about how different he was from previous presidents. Those of you who have been with this podcast since the beginning last year know that my father was a proud Georgian. And so Jimmy Carter being elected to the presidency felt very personal for him, to the point where I can say that I have been to Plains, Georgia. And it really is a town in the absolute middle of nowhere. And that was even more true in, I believe it was 1978 that we went. Now, every 2 to 3 years, we would go to Georgia to see my father's family. And it was always an interesting series of events because my father's brothers, for the most part, still lived there, always had this kind of chip on their shoulder about the fact that my father left Georgia and moved to New Jersey and lived a very different life than they did. They felt strongly that you should stay where you were born and raised and make that place better. And my father felt equally strongly that he was not going to spend his life in very racist Georgia, especially after coming back from fighting in the Korean War. He was very clear he was not going to do that. So going to visit them always came with these sort of interesting conversations and situations. Well, in the summer of 1978, my father said we were going to Georgia to visit his family, but that part of our trip was also going to be that we were going to Plains. And as an 8-year-old, my question was, why? What did we lose in Plains, Georgia? First of all, I had no real clear idea where that was. And he showed me on a map. And I again asked, what did we lose there? Why are we going? And he said, it's the home of the President of the United States. And it's important for all of us to see it, to see where he came from, and to understand the heights that you can reach if you work hard. So off we went to Plains, Georgia, and saw the, I don't know, 6 or 8 foot peanut that greets you when you come into town. and we passed the house that Jimmy and Rosalind Carter lived in before he was president and after he was president, which is a house he built himself. We went to the peanut factory that Jimmy Carter inherited from his father, James Carter Sr., and ran for years before he got into politics. People have always described Jimmy Carter as just a peanut farmer. But the part that people forget is that Jimmy Carter was a millionaire by the time he entered the presidency. And that was at a time when millionaires were not run of the mill. Jimmy Carter was also a nuclear engineer in the Navy. And one of the things I remember clearly from my childhood, one of the first news stories that I really understood was the 3 Mile Island nuclear meltdown, which happened in 1979. And Jimmy Carter felt very strongly that he, as the President of the United States, needed to go to 3 Mile Island and see the reactor and see the meltdown. Now, no one in his cabinet wanted him to go. But ironically, he was the perfect president at that time to go because he was a nuclear engineer, because he understood what had actually happened when most of the country didn't have any idea. We know what we were told, but we did not understand the seriousness of that situation. And most of us really wouldn't understand until Chernobyl happened many, many years later. To her credit, the First Lady, Rosalind Carter, went with him when he went to 3 Mile Island, which in today's landscape is an amazing thing because she also understood what had actually happened. So Jimmy Carter was a man way ahead of his time. And my father was correct. Seeing where he came from and where he had grown up and where he gained his honesty and his sense of humor from was important because up until Jimmy Carter, presidents for the most part were rich, and by rich I mean inherited family money. They were lifelong politicians. They were people who most Americans would see as someone higher than them, as someone who came from a family greater than theirs. And Jimmy Carter was the first president a lot of people have said in their memories of him over the last week felt like a normal person. He felt like someone you could sit down and have a beer with, or you could sit down and have dinner with, and that he would actually listen to you and your problems and not make it all about him. And in today's political landscape, that's an amazing thing to be able to look back and to see. So my thoughts and prayers are with the Carter family this week. They lost their matriarch, Rosalind, last year. In 2023. And now they've lost their patriarch. But he lived long enough so that not only his children, but his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren were able to see what an amazing life he led and what an incredible example he left for Americans. So, job well done, Jimmy Carter. Rest in peace. with your wife. Thank you, everybody, for joining me this week, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.